So in some ways, I feel like I'm doing the work that I wish the listener would do.
Interesting.
Which is like, okay, take a second and try to understand what someone else is saying to you.
Welcome to the At Sea Podcast. I'm your host, Justin McRoberts. On April 18th, 1992, I was standing in the outfield of the Oakland Coliseum in Oakland, California, with thousands of others like me. It was about an hour before Bono and U2 took the stage for a Bay Area stop on the Zoo tour. On the mic and on the stage was an MC named Chuck D, pacing back and forth, delivering these powerful, poetic lines with an authority and a focus I quite honestly hadn't seen before in a performer and an artist, and I have rarely experienced that since. Chuck D was and is a singular performer and lyricist, but as much as I was being swept up in the brilliance of Public Enemy, what I was primarily experiencing was the full force of hip-hop. I was being invited into a narrative and a narrative form with which I was almost entirely unfamiliar, but one that would eventually take its prominent place in the center of public life and dialogue. I honestly can't think of a popular art form as broadly accessible while being so politically aware, so culturally aware, so self-aware as hip-hop. My guest on this episode of the At Sea Podcast is hip-hop artist Propaganda, and our conversation picks up where so much of hip-hop begins, with a sense of home and a sense of place. Check it out. You're from West Covina?
Originally South Central, but yeah, grew up in West Covina.
So, place, a sense of place, it shows up a lot in your work in general.
Yeah.
It shows up a lot in hip-hop in general. Can you talk about the importance of place, not just in kind of the broad world of hip-hop, but specifically for you, why a sense of place and a sense of, like, maybe even the word origin might work here,
Yeah.
like continues to come back up?
Yeah. Well, your narrative has to start somewhere.
Right.
You know, and the shaping of your personhood, at least in my experience, is very closely tied to my origins and origin story and what's in that. You know, it was some of the beauty of Los Angeles and the West, and obviously specifically West Covina, is the multicultural motif, the Mexican American, the Latino heritage, the Filipino heritage, the even the gang life, the graffiti, the skateboarding, like all that was inside of that city.
Yep.
And the values that it taught me are still a part of who I am as a person. You know what I'm saying? So like it's just such a part of your personhood.
Which like that sounds like that's a kind of a broadly human reality. I mean, like, of course, where you come from is always a part of your story, but the fact that it comes up more often, in other words, you don't hear country artists always come back to, or as often come back to the place. This is the town it came from specific.
Yeah.
There's like the general idyllic sort of like came from a small town.
Yeah.
But it's this kind of like, it's a small town, but it's not in the same way as like being from South Central, being from West Covina has like, it's really specific, at least in my experience, more so in rap and hip hop than I hear it in other, like you hear filmmakers coming back all the time about their hometown.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Again, like there's a collective identity, because of a shared experience that like it's important because again, it's a sense of self, a sense of place, belonging.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A lot of it's tied to your city.
So I was being your last two projects, Crimson and Excellent.
Yeah.
And I'd always really loved, because my first experience with you was the collection called Excellent.
Yeah.
And then I liked Crimson Chord, and then the more I went back and forth, it seems like a it's not, I don't want to use the word edge, it's like a darker collection of songs.
Which is
Crimson Chord.
Yeah.
Like it's darker, it's heavier. There's is that a reflection of season? Is there
like the story I was trying to say, which was the idea of like that, all the parts of our history are important and are redeemable and are being redeemed.
Which means you got to go back and touch on. It means
you got to go back and
really
touch on
stuff.
all the stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because do you think your stuff comes in, or do you find yourself writing in seasons and collections? In other words,
oh, absolutely.
Like, so are you conscious of that in the process?
Yeah, I'm writing in like it's like a body of work.
And you know that as you're doing it.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, really?
That's reflective of a season. Yeah, absolutely.
Does stuff end up on the floor that doesn't get picked up and used?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, plenty of it.
But in the meantime, like, you have a sense of this is for a really specific purpose, and we're going to tie all these songs together in a few months.
Yeah, I get an arc. The narrative arc is first. Like,
oh, really?
You know what I mean? Like, this is what we want to talk about.
Almost like it's almost like putting together like a book. Then.
Totally. Yeah.
More so than like a collection of singles, because a lot of more pop-oriented hip hop stuff is more of a collection of singles.
No, for me,
for you, this is a story from front to back.
It's an anthology. Yeah. So I have the what I am trying to say first, and then fill the gaps there, and that's where the creativity comes in. Because it's like Van Gogh Wait, is it Van Gogh that did the blue periods?
That was Monet.
Monet, yeah. So if you...
no, it was Van Gogh.
It was Van Gogh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're like, I can only use blue. Like, how do you paint a sunset with only blue?
Yeah.
Well, you have to be an incredible painter. So that constriction makes, to me, like, that's where the art comes in.
That's fascinating.
You can do that, yeah.
My buddy Mike, who's part of season 1 of the podcast, talks about like the restrictions of songwriting, specifically as a pop songwriter, and that it's for a lot of like more folk oriented artists, it's like walking into a studio and you've got those brushes and these inks and you can use anything.
Yeah.
But for a pop songwriter,
yeah.
because of this, like he's got like this one brush,
and
it's a 3x3 canvas, and it's like make people feel something with this.
Yes.
Kind of, and like the limitation really squeezes out of you this like art form, it's stuff that you wouldn't get otherwise. And so for you, like your limitation, what you're doing with the record, like it begins with this is what this thing is about.
Yes.
And if it lands out of bounds of that, it's not gonna have not gonna have a place. Mm-hmm. Sort of grates against, to some degree, the way people are being trained now by tech to engage with music. Because they go from one song and they bounce to the next. You're really asking people to enter into a longer narrative. Yeah,
yeah, and I think that lasts. You know what I mean?
The longer narrative.
The longer narrative will last. You know, kids are still required to read the Iliad. You know.
Yeah.
I engage a page turner, burner stage, the fragrance raises similar to native sages, sage and unlocking a cage of praises for rock of ages. Let random rambling rappers rant and raving. I inflame verbs to your nerve endings, literally feeling these words in my tendons and rattling occupants of the venue sinews while the eulogy be orchestrating continuous crescendos. Excellent, been down since Exodus. Like what if the Egyptians and Israelites joined forces?
So some of my favorite tracks on Crimson Cord are collaborations.
Yeah.
And another facet of hip hop that's somewhat distinctive is like you almost never come across a rapper hip hop album that doesn't include 2, 3, 5, 7 collaborations.
Yeah.
And not that there isn't some sort of collaborative effort on on a folk album, but like, folk collaboration is more like with it.
It's songwriting.
It's songwriting, or they'll do like some separate project, like the Monsters of Folk.
Yeah.
And they'll call it something else. But there really is this shared thing happening in rap and hip hop. Like, is there a reason for the distinctive? Like, why is it yet shared like that? Because it really is a distinctive.
Wow. I actually never thought of it that way. I think hip hop in its origins, and I don't know if this is true of all artists, but I know like from a 50,000 perspective, like hip hop in its origins wasn't a recorded experience. It was a live experience, and
like a communal share.
It was a communal share
in a room with people experience.
Yeah, and the cipher, if you will, was like 4 to 5 guys in a circle, and they're passing the mic. You know what I'm saying? I wonder, and if that's where it comes from, you know what I'm saying, is this idea of like, we're building off each other, you know what I'm saying? But it's inherent in hip hop culture, because it's the same as like the breakdancer or the b-boys. Nobody solos. It's like it's all of us. This dude takes a turn in a circle, that dude takes a turn in a circle. So it's the MC is the same thing. Like I bust, and then you pass the mic to this dude, he busts, and we just, you know what I'm saying? So I think that like maybe somehow it got into the subconscious of the culture, that like that's embedded into how the experience is.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it like that. I love, by the way, that like some people go to the 30,000 foot perspective. You went straight to 50.
50,000.
we're going to 50,000
way
feet.
up there.
We're going all the way up.
Yeah.
I'm going to see it from the very top. When you talk about your process, you begin with the broad idea for a collection. Can you take me from like a singular song? Can you take me from the inception of a particular song to completed work? Is there a normal pattern for you?
No.
Oh, really?
It's kind of all over the place. I generally like my phone has like thousands of like notes.
Oh, really?
On the like notes thing, it's thousands of them of
What do you?
stuff.
Are you just using Apple Notes?
Just my notes, just my regular. Yeah, not like Evernote, nothing special. Just the Apple.
What it came with.
What it came with. Yeah. And yeah, so like I'm essentially never not writing.
Okay.
It's while I'm washing dishes, watching my kids, whatever. Like you're jotting ideas. You know, the CNN's on in the background, or a podcast is on. You know what I mean? And whatever it is, or something happening, something I'm chewing on, maybe like a turn of phrase my wife said the night before. I'm like, man, it's such an interesting turn of phrase. And I'll just kind of tuck it away, you know.
It's like that Mary Oliver. It was like a prescription or for living a good life is to what was it, to pay attention, be astonished, and tell about it.
Yes.
And this sort of like this like you have a place. Like if you capture, because everyone does, right? Everyone catches that moment like, oh, that was neat.
Yeah.
But not everyone
archives it,
or even has a system for it. And it's kind of the difference between like actually being an artist and just kind of being neat and creative.
Yeah. You know what? And it's funny, sometimes it gets in the way of like my marriage, because like my wife will say something or she'll articulate a feeling or an emotion. And like all of a sudden I'm like, you know, my eyes went up and to the left, because I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. What a phrase. You know, and I'm just thinking about how it just says so much about just the human experience and how many people could probably relate to what she just said. And so now I'm writing a poem in my head while she's still talking, you know.
To you.
Yeah, to
about
me.
You.
Yeah. And I'm like, she's like, babe. And I'm like, what? You know, what do you, like, can you, and I'm like, nah, just you said something.
I'm writing.
Yeah, and she's like, don't say you're. It's like, are you paying attention? I'm like, actually, yes. And I'm like, more than ever, because what you said was so interesting, you know. Yeah, I didn't catch everything after that, but like, but yeah.
I caught that part I found really useful.
Yeah.
That's very good.
Yeah.
What it do to a boy's brain to see his father through glass walls, while algebra homework's less important than last calls. Collect calls come from upstate. You eventually grow numb, it's a sad state. And it's hard to conceive, let alone believe that you're worth it, when your little brother's blood is still stained on your Converse. And system leave him hanging, they still binge on syringes. Filled with self-hate, that's why we fly off the hinges and self-medicate. Still struggle at the smell of that fresh kush, even after salvation it's tough. Looking back at wasted life who never had a chance to begin with. Y'all talking about a lamb that's sinless, but the pain that guides us, the strings that tie us.
We ran into each other, I was like maybe 4 years ago in New Hampshire.
Okay.
And had a real brief conversation about, it was sort of like, it was the beginning of the broader public expression of the Black Lives Matter movement. And part of what we talked about real quick was the lack of bridge builders. Anytime there's any sort of like necessary movement, you've got your radicals and your prophets, and then you have like the folks who, you know, need to hear. Yeah. But then there's so few people in the middle. Yeah. And we talked about like the uncomfortable place you find yourself in. Yeah. Because you actually end up finding a place with a lot of like white audiences. Yeah. as a bridge builder.
Yeah.
So in the last 4 years, which have been turbulent,
Yes.
to say the least.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about your expression? Like, do you see yourself as a bridge builder? Do you cherish that? Is that intentional, or is it just it's something that happens and you wish it didn't?
No, I think more of myself as like, as a sociologist, and I feel like or an artist with a sociologist like bend. So like
Okay.
as that, you're observing and reporting, but I need to be able to report in a language that the listener can hear.
Okay.
Right. So I do take a lot of care and a lot of pride in making something understandable. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And not simple, you know what I'm saying, but understandable.
Yeah.
So because sometimes it has to be complex because I'm articulating something complex.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? And yeah, it does take a little work. Like, so I don't see. I'm not trying to ABC people, but I am trying to say, okay, there's a disconnect that you have. Maybe I can, because I see it clearly.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a way, and if I listen to you well enough to see, okay, what don't you understand? And if you start articulating that, now I'm listening. I'm going, oh, okay, so I actually see your vantage point. Okay, cool. Okay, let me give it to you like this then. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, okay.
So in some ways, I feel like I'm doing the work that I wish the listener would do.
Interesting.
Which is like, okay, take a second and try to understand what someone else is saying to you. You know what I'm saying? So I think the bridge builder part for me is really just a product of the fact that I don't feel I need to give any solutions in my music or in my work, which is, I know for the average evangelical listener, they're like, that's, that's like anathema. You know what I'm saying?
Give me a handle.
Yeah,
You're not trying to
or
do
like, well, the answer is Jesus, right? And I'm like, well,
which is a simple
yeah, you know what I'm
answer
saying?
rather than the complex answer, which is actually the person of Jesus.
Yes. So like, well, do you really know what you're saying when you're saying the answer is Jesus? You know what I'm saying? So exactly.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, I'm not here to prescribe any answers. I am translating. So I think that because of that, since I'm not coming to tell you what to do with this information, I think people see me as much more approachable because I'm just laying it out in a way that I think you can understand.
And I love the way you got to earlier about the difference between the things that are simple, and then there really are elements of life, elements of the human experience that are complex. And if I can, I'm not trying to make things simple, like you said.
Yeah.
I don't want to make it simple. I want to make it understandable.
Understandable, yeah.
Well, complexity, like the difference between simple and complex. The Black experience of America is harder.
Yes.
Well, that's simple. But the complexity is actually where the rubber meets the road, because then understanding, like, what does that mean? Because the response is like, well, my grandfather grew up poor too.
Yeah.
But now you're responding to a real simple formula, and that's not what I'm trying to say.
Exactly.
And that does take more translation. I love that.
Yeah, it takes more work. And it's just harder.
If you would allow me a second to deal with some in-house issues here. Hey, Pastor, it's hard for me when you quote Puritans. Oh, the precious Puritans. Have you not noticed our facial expressions? One of bewilderment and heartbreak, like not you too, Pastor. You know they were chaplains on slave ships, right? Would you quote Columbus to Cherokees? Would you quote Cortez to Aztecs, even if their theology was good? It just sings of blind privilege, wouldn't you agree? Your precious Puritans. They looked my onyx and bronze-skinned forefathers in their face. Their polytheistic, God-hating face. Their shackled, diseased, imprisoned face. And taught a gospel that said that God had multiple images in mind when he created us in it. Therefore, destined salvation contains a contentment in the stage for which they were given, which is to be owned by your forefathers' superior image-bearing face, says your precious Puritan.
So I want to throw some phrases at you.
Okay.
And just kind of let you take them
Yes.
for a minute.
Yes.
it's just sort of like establishing something of a lexicon. So
Got you.
There are things that you understand in a certain way,
Got
and
you.
maybe someone who isn't familiar with your work might not.
Yes.
So I've used the word I've used the word hip hop a few times here.
Okay.
When I say hip hop, like tell me about hip hop.
Yeah. So hip hop is the title of the cultural expression or the cultural experience, if you will, that's expressed through multiple channels. Traditionally, we would say like the 4 elements. So you'd say like rap or emceeing, DJing, graffiti arts, and breaking, right? Breakdancing. That's like your purists would stop there. But as the culture has evolved, there's other expressions of it. There's expressions in fashion, in language, in the philosophies, in activism. You know what I'm saying? And
all those end up becoming part of hip hop.
Part of the cultural experience of hip hop. So like the lens for which you're seeing
that's a good difference.
the world, right? So it's not just the art for which, just like samba is not Brazil,
Yeah.
but samba is Brazilian.
Got it.
You understand what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
So it's a lens. So the lens for which you're seeing the world is expressed through. So the lens. So hip hop is the culture, and the way we express it is what people usually call hip hop. So
Got
you're
it.
calling, and for
Like the track is like we call that a hip hop track.
yeah.
But it's a way to actually identify it as part of the broader culture.
Yes.
That is hip hop.
Yes. And for the sake of like your end cap shelf at Walmart, yes, hip hop is a music. You know what I'm saying? Like if you just want for your charts, I'm okay with that.
When's the last time you bought something from the end cap at Walmart?
Never, right?
Right.
But for like if you need a category to put something in, then
Yeah.
hip. But like, like I'm gonna date myself, but like for the purpose of for the sake of argument, somebody like a Jodeci or Boyz II Men,
Yeah.
New Edition, it's R&B, but it's hip hop, like culturally. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, most of the time I would consider that there's like a distinction between because it's R&B and then there was this other thing called hip hop. And part of what I'm picking up is sort of like there wasn't this moment where suddenly hip hop was born. It's almost like there's kind of like a necessary necessary revision of history to understand like okay, it was being born and expressed here.
Yes.
We didn't call it that then.
Yes.
But
yes.
this is hip hop too.
Yes. Again, so the origin story of the Bronx and the failing real estate out there and the burning buildings when landlords were burning the buildings, and then the great like blackout of the Bronx. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Just where if you ever saw the Warriors film, like that was like the precursor to hip hop, and in these abandoned buildings and this hope while disco was happening, downtown.
Yeah.
While that was happening downtown, uptown, like people were trying to figure out how to make sense of the world around them. And Kool Herc was throwing these parties where it cost like 25 cents to get in. You bring speakers and you hook up the 2 records, you know what I'm saying? And like, and the dancers would dance on the breaks, that's why they call break dancers, you know what I'm saying? So like the culture of hip hop, that experience was being born, and really the fathers of it, like I'm saying, were DJs.
Yeah.
So that's why we're like, it's not so much the music is the part that was like commodifiable, if that's a word.
Yeah.
That's the part you can make a commodity, you know what I'm saying, was like a record.
But the culture was broader and deeper.
The culture is much
That's
broader.
good.
Yeah.
Religion.
A way, again, I think it's a way to make sense of the world around you, and which carries a liturgical element of it. And when I say liturgical, I just mean like a way to go, kind of like the David Dark sort of motif where it's like, well, it's not inherently holy. It's just a way to practice life. You know what I'm saying? So so I think it's a way to make sense of your origins and where you're going after and to see the world.
I want you to talk about whiteness, but specifically, I want to go through the doorway of a song I mentioned to you earlier. The track is called 3-Chord Bond.
Yes.
And you do a thing that's, in my experience as a listener, somewhat unique, where you sort of there's an indictment of whiteness in the song, but towards the tail end, and you actually do this in a few ways in other parts of your work too. You sort of flip the script.
Yeah.
Because you do the same thing in a song about Puritans.
Yes.
Well, then you turn it back on
Night
you.
turns on me. Yeah.
coveted your privilege, your generational wealth, your unquestioned personhood, but not your struggle. And we felt it wasn't fair. We wanted your options, your grasp on proper doctrine and literature. It's silly, huh? Your American dream apple pie worked for you, so we worked for you. You made it seem so easy, grit your teeth, you could succeed too. We didn't know your story, shoot. We thought white was white, not Irish or Celtic, or the Bolshevik plight, or the pain of Berenstain inherited. You said you wasn't there, it ain't fair. You wouldn't dare, but we ain't care. But we ain't know better. You told us you struggled too. Rednecks and trailer parks. Me and you were cool. I hurt like but you. That was fire for the fuel that boiled into them riots. Y'all were so confused. Truthfully, so were we. But now we understand.
It borders on it borders on like letting the listener off the hook. Mm-hmm. For a moment, you're like, "Whoa, you're gonna let this thing go," but you actually enter into this tension and sort of, and even like lyrically saying like we've suffered together. We have sort of this same, this sort of sameness here. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about like sort of in the context of that song, your experience of whiteness, and as someone who has like white listenership and as you've said on the song, like got Caucasian friends. Yeah. Talk to me about your experience of whiteness and the way that filters itself into your work.
Yeah, I think that whiteness is, and I'm saying this as like an outsider, right? But whiteness is incredibly, like we keep saying the word complex, but it is. I think it's very diverse in a lot of ways, and a diverse experience of whiteness. And because are we talking like whiteness from like Northern European descent? Are we talking whiteness from like Southeastern? Are we talking like a Bolshevik or Slavic whiteness? You know what I'm saying? A Sicilian, Italian whiteness, which is very different than like, you know, a German whiteness. You know what I'm saying? Yep. So, but as for the sake of our discussion, I am talking whiteness in its American iteration. Yeah, yeah. Right? So in its American iteration, there is a sense of identity politics that come into that where I found that you fall into sort of two camps. One, which is a whiteness that feels cultureless because you don't have to think about culture. Yeah. But that's because you're part of the dominant one. So you don't you don't think about it. So you think about culture in terms of patriotism. So your culture is in terms of nationality. Right. So
rather than an actual origin story.
Rather than an actual origin story, and if you do think of it as an origin story, it's an origin story that's made up, right? So this, you know, these patriots who fought against tyranny, right, and never mind, like put the same oppression on others that they were fighting against. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, yeah. Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, with the quote about like, "Hey, if God is just, then." I'm paraphrasing, but like if God is just, then we got some shit we about to get into. You know what I'm saying? Right. Clearly he didn't say that, but like,
well, it might have been exactly.
Yeah, it might have been exactly.
It's been passed down improperly.
Yeah. But like, he's like, his justice can't stay quiet. It can't stay resting for as long. So eventually, they're like, at some point, we're gonna have to answer for what we've done to everyone. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So this sort of made up. Origin stories of these heroes, these patriots that were like fighting against tyranny and created this land of opportunity that everybody wants to go to. You know what I'm saying? Yep. And if you work hard, you can get this, you know, so my granddaddy worked hard and, you know, and if, you know, he's tough as nails and just this like, this John Wayne-ness, right? That you identify as, well, it's not white or black, it's American because we're American. But again, that's because it's cultureless, right? Yeah. And then you have a whiteness that I think that is a little more self-aware, that like, you know, I listen to Sufjan Stevens, you know, I like going camping, you know what I'm saying? And we like our craft coffee, you know, and Tom's, and we go to our churches that, you know what I'm saying? It's just like this, like, so these two motifs and you're just like, look, dude, I'm just trying to live my life. There's things that sucked, you know what I'm saying? I know, I don't know what I can do about it. Yep. They sucked, but you're right. But like, I like rap too, you know what I'm saying? Right. Yeah, okay. So I find that it's this, this sort of, again, way to situate your identity, and just make sense of the world around you. Because if from the culturalist perspective, you're seeing everyone else get a way to understand their identity. That like the undocumented, the Latino, the Asian, they have a way to identify themselves, right? You know what I'm saying? The Black experience, like BET and Black Brilliance and stuff like that. Now, granted, why we've had to do that is because we were oppressed and we weren't given personhood.
And that's part of what I'm saying.
You know
I see this really interesting twist in what you do, because you actually you almost empathetically recognize the sort of the lack. We began this conversation talking about place. You empathetically recognize and sort of lean into this lack of place.
I get it.
That is like, if you are someone who's given into whiteness.
Yeah.
You are placeless, and you identify that, you sort of lean into it and sort of meet some of your listeners in that place.
And really the reality of the fact that like most Americans are not delusional in the sense that they know that my white history is awful. Like they know it, you know what I'm saying? But like, you gotta remind me every day. Like I don't want to, you know what I'm saying? So like like you said, like what I want to do, what I do in a lot of times in my music is, like you said, it's like you just have to be a better listener. So if you're a better listener, I can go, okay, I actually can sympathize with what you're saying. Now, granted, historically, it's y'all's fault that we've had to find a way to situate our identities around our color because of our collective suffering, because we were collectively oppressed because of our color. So that's why we have this.
Right.
But I'm like, but I get the longing.
I
totally understand your longing.
That's fascinating.
You understand what I'm saying? And again, I understand it because of what you did to me, but the longing's there no less. You know what I'm saying? So as a human, I have to go, you know what? Like Show says, like truth with reconciliation. Truth needs reconciliation. Reconciliation needs truth. We can't stand on either of these islands and think they have to come together. So I'm gonna stand on the island of truth and go, no. You've culturally appropriated us. You've systematically separated us out of success, and then blame us when we don't succeed, right? You've cleared the land that you're standing on, that you said God gave you, belonged to someone else, right? You know, no, that happened. Now, having said that, hey, dude, that's quite a weight to carry. I get it, man. I get it. It's quite a weight to carry. So let's
I love that.
Let's live. You know what I'm saying?
That's good, man.
I'm not gonna ignore it, but I understand. Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
Hey, bro, thanks for your time.
Oh, my pleasure, man.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
That was good.
Easy enough. Yeah. Thanks, man.
And thank you for joining me on this episode of the podcast. Music for this episode was actually borrowed from two of Propaganda's most recent projects, both of which you can find at iTunes. You can dig deeper into Propaganda's work by visiting humblebeast.com/propaganda. If you like what we're up to, leave us a positive review at iTunes and share this episode with a friend or 9, maybe 10. Also, if you'd like to support what we're doing here, you can hop over to patreon.com. That's Patreon, patreon.com, and search my name, Justin McRoberts. Until next time.